The first time I knew something was off was a Tuesday in late May, the kind of humid Dallas afternoon where the asphalt shimmers and the cicadas scream like tiny buzzsaws in the trees. I'd just gotten off a 12-hour shift, 8 to support for a hospital network, which meant a day of passwords, printers, and the kind of panic only a frozen EMR screen can produce. And I was floating on the small joy of pulling into my numbered spot, 27B, and killing the engine. That spot was the one predictable square of life in the sprawl, close to the stairs, half shaded after 3 p.m., and framed on the left by a grumpy ligustrum hedge a stray cat liked to nap under. But when I turned the corner, there it was, a slate-gray Tahoe with a dealer paper plate, nose hanging out like it owned the curb, squatting in 27B as if my lease didn't spell out in bold that the spot came with the rent. I idled. I refuse to be the guy who lays on the horn and escalates a dumb mistake into a feud. Texas heat makes stupid choices easy. It also makes you want your sofa and a fan and 40 quiet minutes. So, I looped the building, found a guest slot by the dumpster, and trudged upstairs, reminding myself to breathe. Maybe someone visiting. Maybe the leasing office gave someone the wrong number. Reasonable people fix reasonable problems. The note I left under the Tahoe's wiper was polite. Hey neighbor, this spot is leased, 27B. Please don't park here. Thanks, 27B. I felt adult, mature. I ate leftover brisket from Hutchins, watched the Rangers lose in extra innings, and told myself the Tahoe would be gone by morning. It wasn't. It was still there at 7:15 a.m., glinting in the new light, windows dusty in a way that told me this car slept here, not just visited. I took 2 photos. I'm that guy now, timestamps, wide shot, close-up of the painted number, and headed to the leasing office when it opened. The manager, a woman named Regina with sharp nails, a blowout that defied humidity, and a framed Leasing Professional of the Year 2019 certificate, gave me a sweet smile that felt like a lid being placed on a boiling pot. We'll handle it, she said. Leave it to us. Do you want the plate? Pictures? We'll handle it, she repeated, fluttering the kind of lashes Comic Sans would wear if it were a person. That night, the Tahoe still owned 27B. When I swung by the office the next morning, the assistant, a college kid in a polo, said, "Oh, that's probably Mr. Knight's nephew. They're close with management. He's between units." He said the last part in a way that suggested between units was both indefinite and not my problem to solve. Mr. Knight was my downstairs neighbor, a bulky guy with a glossy beard and a wardrobe of neon gym shirts. He often wore a lanyard that said security in yellow, though I never saw him leave for work. On weekends, he drank beer on his patio and yelled into his phone about fantasy football trades, with a passion usually reserved for sermons and divorces. His wife, Tasha, was friendlier, quick wave, howdy in the hall, a pot of chili once, when the fire alarm shut our building down for 3 hours. But something had shifted in March. They'd bought a new sectional, started hosting Friday game nights that ran loud past midnight, and a steady parade of cousins, nephews, and bros became part of the traffic flow around our stairs. Somewhere in that stream, the Tahoe had docked. When I knocked that evening, Mr. Knight answered with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You the 27B guy?" he said, as if I'd committed the social sin of being my own lease. "Yeah, that's my spot." "Temporarily reassigned," he said, the words slathered in a kind of neighborly faux official tone. "Manager knows, family's visiting." "Regina told me she'd handle it," I said. "She didn't say reassigned," he shrugged. "It's handled. I wanted to keep it decent." "Look, man, park in the guest area like everyone. I'm tired. I just want my spot." He tilted his head. "Maybe you should have gotten here earlier." That was the first flicker in my chest, the petty heat. In another life, I scroll past neighbor revenge threads on Reddit and laugh at how people combust over grass clippings and property lines. But I stood there, sweaty and tired, feeling how quickly fairness gets personal when it's your tiny square of asphalt that's been stolen. I left before my mouth said something my lease couldn't fix. The next morning, the Tahoe was still there. On Thursday, I found a crumpled Whataburger bag in front of my door, the greasy ghost of a patty melt, bleeding through the paper like an accusation. On Friday, it was an empty Modelo can balanced on my knob. Saturday morning, a torn pizza box sat on my doormat, dotted with congealed cheese like a crime scene. The garbage wasn't random. It was art directed to be insulting. On Sunday, a contractor bag half full of household trash leaned against my jamb. split near the bottom so a slick of something sugar sour spread under my welcome mat. I took pictures because that's what you do when people push lines and lie about it later. I recorded a short video of the bag, time-stamped, narrated in a level voice. Trash dumped at my door, Building C, 27B. I walked to the office, ready to be the most tedious person alive. Regina wasn't sorry. Regina was offended that I was making this a thing. I have 17 buildings, she said, fanning herself with a stack of move-in checklists. There are processes. What process covers the part where someone steals my spot, dumps trash at my door, and your office says it's handled while it keeps happening? Regina tapped her keyboard without typing. Mr. Knight is a long-term resident. We value our tenant relationships. I'm a tenant, I said, and this relationship is garbage. She gave me a lease addendum with the towing company's number on it and a smile that said good luck. The tow company needed a form from management for proof of authorization. Management would provide the form once the situation merits intervention. The sentence was Regina's. I stood in the lot looking at the Tahoe, still fat in 27B, and understood I was being taught my place. So I went home, opened my laptop, and made a folder called Evidence. I dragged in the pictures and the videos, added a copy of the lease with the clause circled, and took a slow breath. If life is a choose-your-own adventure, there's a page that says, turn to 12 to bang on doors and start a shouting match, and a page that says, turn to 35 to become politely relentless. I picked 35. But the next week would pull me toward a third page I didn't know existed yet, the one where pettiness, systems, and one stubborn neighbor like me collide, and where neighbor revenge stops, being a story you listen to for laughs and becomes the logic of survival in a building where power wears a name badge and a blowout. Monday morning I left for work early and parked across the street by a dentist's office that threatened to tow all unauthorized vehicles, which, according to the empty lot, included no one. I took Uber back to my building at lunch to meet a handyman named Luis I'd found on Nextdoor, who installed a small, sleek door camera for me for $60 cash and a Dr. Pepper. The camera pointed down the breezeway, wide enough to catch any visitor to my door, and, crucially, the stretch of railing where the stairs turned, so I'd get a 3-second preview of whoever rounded the corner. I didn't want to be the surveillance guy, but I wanted my life back. It took 2 days for the camera to earn its keep. Wednesday at 10:37 p.m., a figure crept up the stairs carrying a hefty bag. He wore a hoodie despite the heat and scuffed white sneakers. When he got to my door, he sidestepped the tiny lens as if it could burn him. He bent, ripped the bag open with a quick twist, dumped coffee grounds and shredded mail across my mat, and hustled off. The motion alert pinged my phone. I watched the whole thing from my sofa, volume low. When he hit the stairs, he looked back, and the camera saw his face full on. It was the nephew. It was the driver of the Tahoe. And here is where petty swings into bold. He smiled at the lens like a tourist. I clipped the footage, added timestamps, and emailed it to management with the subject: trash vandalism, video evidence, request for action. I printed a copy of the lease and highlighted the parts about quiet enjoyment, assigned parking, and the community policy on harassment. The response came from Regina at 8:07 a.m. We'll look into it. By 6 p.m., a paper appeared on the building door. Reminder of community guidelines. Be kind, be clean, be considerate. It was blue paper. It smelled like toner. It did not have the word consequences anywhere on it. I printed my own paper. It wasn't a manifesto. It was 3 pictures: the Tahoe in 27B, the frame of the nephew with his hand mid-dump over my mat, the clause in the lease about assigned parking. On the bottom I wrote, "If this is your guest, please tell him to stop. If this is your spot, please return it. We are adults. 27B. I taped it to my door. It was not my cleanest move. It was public in a way. Public things get messy. But the next morning, the note was gone, and a new piece of paper in its place said, in block Sharpie, "Quit snitchin'." I smelled Sharpie when I stepped outside, like the letters were still off gassing. The porch light of 26B, the Knight's unit, flicked on. Mr. Knight opened his door and, without looking at me, called loud enough for anyone in the breezeway to hear, "Some folks don't know how to be neighborly. Always tattling." The word had a kindergarten sugar to it that made my teeth ache. The nephew, a lanky 1920-something with a gold chain that flashed even in the poor light, walked out past Mr. Knight with 2 bags of trash and bumped my shoulder. That night, I did something I refused to do at first. I read neighbor revenge posts, hours of them, Reddit threads with millions of views, TikToks with neighbors building ridiculous fences, next-door epics about hedges and HOA bylaws. The problem with exposure therapy is that it exposes you. Petty becomes strategy, strategy becomes doctrine, doctrine becomes righteousness. I felt the old Lutheran kid in me stirring, the boy who cataloged report cards and kept his baseball cards mint in plastic sleeves. Only now his binder was full of lease clauses. I called the non-emergency police line. Civil issue, the dispatcher said, bored polite. Document it. Take it up with management, or small claims. I made a folder for the city too, a spreadsheet of calls, dates, times, who I spoke to. I was building a case while my evenings built a second world in my head, one where the Tahoe vanished on a hook behind a tow truck, like the righteous being assumed into heaven. On Friday, a box showed up at my door, a reflective sign, custom ordered, that said 27B, assigned, tow away. The company would have happily added a skull and crossbones. I kept it clean. I mounted it on a cheap Home Depot post and sunk it in the mulch at the head of the spot with a 40-pound bag of pea gravel for stability. It lasted 8 hours. Around midnight, I heard a thunk, peeked out the blinds, and watched two silhouettes, nephew and a friend, snap the sign at the post, toss it into the ligustrum hedge, and clap hands like they'd nailed a TikTok dance. Saturday at noon, Regina finally called. "We've issued a warning," she said, voice crisp, as if she'd wrapped it in cellophane. "We've reminded all residents that harassment is not tolerated and that assigned spaces are to be respected." "Does the warning have a name on it?" I asked. "Or is it the blue paper again?" "Sir," she said, "if you continue to escalate, he's dumping trash. He broke my sign. Sir, it's important to keep a calm environment." I pictured Regina's certificate. I pictured the way Mr. Knight called her Gina in the breeze once, like they had a phone plan together. I felt the switch flip. "Okay," I said. Calm. Calm meant I called the city's code compliance about trash dumping. Calm meant I checked the Texas property code about peaceable enjoyment and quiet enjoyment and the obligations of landlords. Calm meant I printed 15 flyers for a parking and cleanliness task force meeting by the pool on Tuesday night, open to all residents. I wasn't the HOA. I wasn't anything, but buildings are small towns with shared walls, and sometimes you have to act like the mayor until someone else shows up with a sash. The flyer was simple. Are you tired of towing roulette? Are you stepping over trash on your way to work? Pool seating, Tuesday 7 p.m. Bring your story. I slid one under each door in Building C, then B, then A. I felt ridiculous. I felt like the volunteer parent who brings sign-in sheets to a Little League game. But at 6:59 on Tuesday, 12 chairs were full. By 7:10, people came with beers, one guy with a notebook, a woman with a stroller and dark circles that looked like smudged ink. They were nurses, teachers, a cop from Frisco who kept saying, "Be off the record," a grad student who just wanted someone to turn off the pool speakers after 11, and they had stories. Trash dumped on porches, packages gone, a tow truck that only materialized when Regina's favorite residents complained. "Who's the Tahoe?" I asked finally. Heads went crooked. A few thumbs pointed as if choreographed toward the night balcony. We didn't say his name out loud, but the breeze picked it up anyway. We wrote a letter, clean, factual, gentle but firm, and we all signed it. "We, the undersigned residents of Buildings A-C, request that management enforce assigned parking and community cleanliness policies without favoritism. We have documented multiple violations, including vandalism and harassment, which we will provide upon request." We scanned it, we emailed it, we printed a copy and slid it under Regina's door with a dozen signatures like a bouquet. 2 nights later, the Tahoe was still in 27B. But that morning, as I left for work, I noticed a line of small, oily stains on the asphalt, little black commas trailing from spot 27B across the lot and out the gate. The Tahoe had moved in the night and come back, bleeding some small automotive truth. On my mat, there was no trash. Instead, there was a single note, folded, tucked under a magnet shaped like a cowboy boot. "You think you're smart." No period, no signature. I held the note and realized the thing that now sat behind my ribs like a second heart wasn't anger. It was clarity. Some people push because they're used to systems catching them. Some people push because they're bored. Some push because they can and because it works. And some stop pushing only when a larger system pushes back, or when someone refuses to scare. I had one more lever to pull, one that would take what was petty and make it official. And I knew it would be messy and expensive and maybe stupid. But the next morning, I would dress in my cleanest button-down, print 3 copies of the evidence folder, and walk into a courthouse with fluorescent lights and a vending machine that sold sadness and Coke bottles. Neighbor revenge, but notarized. Small claims court in Dallas County smells like carpet cleaner and old paper. The clerk wore readers on a chain and called me Hun. When I said I wanted to file for damages related to interference with lease rights and property harassment, she slid me a form and a pen with a flower taped to it. "Keep it simple," she said, like she was giving me life counsel. Judges like straight lines. I named the property management company, the owner entity, the LLC buried 3 layers deep in the lease. And because small claims demands names, I added John Doe, resident, aka Mr. Knight, pending discovery. I attached photos, the video clip, copies of emails, and a request for nominal damages and an injunction requiring management to enforce the lease. Filing fee, $54.50. I put it on my Amex because revenge in 25 is a points game. It wasn't even the court papers that made things move. It was what happened while I was in the clerk's line. My phone buzzed with a motion alert. Back at Building C, someone was at my door. The camera opened to a close-up of Tasha, Mr. Knight's wife, her face weary, eyes shining like she'd teared up on the walk over. She held a grocery bag, the fancy brown kind from Central Market. "Hey," she said to the lens, voice soft. "You there? We need to talk." By the time I got home, the bag was on my mat. Inside, a 6-pack of Topo Chico, a bakery loaf, and a note written with care. "I'm sorry," it said, "for the trash, for the mess, for the parking. I asked Rod not to involve his nephew." Things got out of hand. Regina promised us a garage spot when we renewed. She said she'd work it out until one opened. That meant your spot sometimes. I didn't know she told you it was handled. I'm not excusing it. I'm asking if we can reset. I like living near people who say hello and return packages. The word garage lodged in my brain. We had 12 garages in the complex. They were unicorns. If Regina had dangled one to keep a renewing lease, and if she used my spot as bridge loan collateral, then the problem wasn't just Mr. Knight's petty nephew or my stubborn pride. The problem was a manager who played traffic cop with rules depending on who waived and who paid early, and who brought the office Starbucks gift cards at Christmas. I texted Tasha, "Can we talk on the breezeway at 6? She sent a thumbs up. At 6:03, we stood 6 feet apart like a pandemic ghost. She wore a UT sweatshirt and anxiety. She spoke fast. Rod's brother got out in March. He's been staying with us. Regina said no long-term guests, but did the wink thing. Rod did the I'm security thing. I told them both it was dumb. The trash was the nephew. He thinks he's a comedian. Why the note that said quit snitching? I asked. She gave me a look that said, you know why. I didn't write it, but I didn't tear it down either. Why didn't you just park the Tahoe in a guest spot like everyone else? Because Rod likes to win, she said, and because he knows Regina will let him. We both stood a second in the thick Texas dusk, the kind that makes cicadas sound like static. I told her about the task force, the letter, the court. Her eyes widened at the last one. You sued? I asked the court to make the rules real, I said. Her mouth twisted into a smile that hadn't decided if it was amused or impressed. You're that guy, she said. The binder guy. Guilty, I said. Rod's sister is Regina's cousin, she said, like she was telling me the answer to a riddle I'd been circling. They go to the same church. They rotate Thanksgiving. The Tahoe was never about a car. It was about whose family. There it was. I felt both relieved and stupid. I'd built spreadsheets and a task force and a small claims cannon to fight a battle that was really a family picnic with a parking pass. But knowing the rules of the game doesn't mean you stop playing. It means you change your approach. Help me fix it, I said. Not in a gotcha way. In a we all live here way. She shrugged. Rod won't cave because you sued. He'll cave because his cousin calls and says the owner called and says the corporate office called and says the city called. So we make those calls, I said. The next morning, I filed a complaint with the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs about uneven enforcement of lease terms. I attached the letter, the signatures, the timeline. I CC'd the LLC's registered agent, a man in a glass tower downtown whose name made Google spit out donor lists and a photo with a mayor. I didn't threaten. I didn't rant. I wrote like a paralegal who cuts his own hair, sharp, a little too precise, impossible to argue with. At 3:12 p.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Amanda with Regional," the voice said, cheerful. "We've received your letter. We're very concerned. We want to ensure equitable enforcement at all our properties." Equitable is a word that can mean, "I'm about to delay you," or "I'm about to drop a hammer." This sounded like the second one. "Great," I said. "The garage list is first come, first served," she said. "No promises, no winks. We've instructed the on-site team accordingly. We've also authorized towing for unauthorized vehicles in assigned spaces, effective immediately. You'll see signage." I saw it the next morning. New, reflective, property-wide signs that didn't need my Home Depot post. I saw something else. The Tahoe gone from 27B and in a guest spot, front tire resting on a curb like a dog sulking with its head on your foot. I took a picture and didn't print it. I took a breath that felt a size larger than my ribs. Rod didn't speak to me for a week. When he finally did, it was on his patio, beer in hand, voice flat. "You didn't have to do all that." "I tried not to," I said. He looked at his phone. "We could have kept it between neighbors." "My Matt would disagree," I said. "So would the 18 people by the pool." He stared at the fence. "Family's family. And neighbors are neighbors," I said. "We share walls." The thing about neighbor revenge stories is that they love a big reveal. The tow truck, the cops, the handshake that turns to a wrist lock. Real life is softer. It's memos and meetings and new signs and a quiet list somewhere in a regional office that says, "Watch this property." It's Tasha waving again in the hall. It's a sweep of the breezeway that doesn't leave coffee grounds in your shoe treads. But in the days that followed, something else crept in. Absurdity, the way feuds curdle into folklore. Memes popped up on our building group chat with photoshopped images of the Tahoe on the 50-yard line at AT&T Stadium. Someone, the Frisco cop, probably, taped a fake parking ticket to it that read, "Violation, hubris." And one night, I dreamed the ligustrum hedge whispered legal advice in Latin. I woke laughing, not with triumph, with relief, because the pettiness had become a story, and stories can be put away like winter coats. 2 months later, 27B was still mine, clean as a cut in the asphalt, and life had fallen into a boredom I guarded like a treasure. The binder lived on a shelf, updated but closed. The task force became a once-a-month pool hang where we traded dog sitters and plumber numbers and the best HEB salsa ranking. Salsa Cremosa Jalapeno took it in a landslide. Regina had a new friendliness that fit like a loaner jacket. Stiff, maybe not hers, but on her shoulders. A new assistant answered the phone with, "How can I help?" in a way that meant it. The nephew vanished, evaporated back into the orbit of cousins and couches. Tasha and I became nod friends, then small talk friends, then the kind of neighbors who grab each other's packages when rain hits. What lingered, though, was the noise in my own head, the part that had enjoyed the building of the case, the clean click of making a mess line up into a picture. If I'm honest, there's a part of me that was disappointed there wasn't a TV-ready showdown, but I also knew the quiet was the point. We don't go to war to build statues. We go so we can sit on our couch with a fan on, and a topo sweating on the table, and a baseball game humming in the background. Peace, I was learning, was a kind of revenge, too. One Saturday in August, we held a little cookout by the pool. Nothing huge, just 12 or so of us, hot dogs, a Bluetooth speaker, a borrowed canopy. At a certain point, neighbor revenge as a keyword in my brain softened into neighbor repair. People are complicated. The Frisco cop who kept an extra leash in his trunk for stray dogs, the grad student who always brought foil for leftovers, the retired teacher who could fix any zipper. Even Rod wandered by, eyes narrowed like a cat deciding if the sunbeam was worth the risk. He grabbed a hot dog. He nodded at me. "Truce?" he said finally. "Truce," I said, and we clinked Shiner bottles in the international sign for "Let's not be idiots." Maybe this is where a normal story ends, with a handshake and an HOA that learned a lesson, and me naming the brands on the picnic table to make the scene American enough for YouTube. Whataburger ketchup, Doritos, a jar of Clausen pickles floating like green commas in brine, paper plates from Target that tried too hard with their abstract summer pattern. But life keeps going, and so do petty gods. A week later, at 2:14 a.m., my phone pinged with the door camera. A figure in a hoodie, again, bulking the stairs like a cheap horror movie. He stepped into my door and bent, and my stomach dropped. Old fear triggered like a muscle memory. Then he stood and taped something to my door. I watched from my bed, barely breathing, as he turned and walked down the stairs, slow, no rush. It wasn't the nephew. It wasn't Rod. It was a delivery kid from a taqueria, earbuds in, living his best nocturnal life. I padded to the door and peeled back the tape. A receipt. A bag on my mat. Order 27B, birria tacos X2, consume, lime, extra cilantro. I hadn't ordered. The note on the receipt said, from a neighbor who messed up, for the binder guy. T. The T was a flourish. Tasha. I ate one taco standing in the kitchen, cold tile under bare feet. The city quiet in the way cities get at 2 a.m. when the air conditioning units conspire, and the only cars are the ones running from or toward something. I put the second taco in the fridge because future me deserved a small mercy, and I stood for a long time feeling the way anger can calcify and lose you, the small sweetness that fixes a week. I texted a thank you in the morning, and Tasha sent a thumbs up and a picture of their dog with a bandana that said, positive vibes, which made me both groan and smile. If you want a clean moral, and I do, because revenge stories need one, or they sit wrong in your gut, it's this. Power hides in small places. In office friendships and winks, in assigned spots and temporarily reassigned lies, in who gets a garage and who gets a form. My mistake was thinking the only counterpower was louder anger. It turned out to be paperwork, signatures, a camera, and patience. It turned out to be neighbors, plural. We created our own small gravity, enough to bend the orbit of the on-site sun just a few degrees. That was enough. I won't pretend I didn't imagine grander ends. In part 3 of the movie version, I would orchestrate a Rube Goldberg display, motion-activated sprinklers timed to baptize the Tahoe, a Bluetooth speaker hidden in the ligustrum whispering, parking violation, in Latin at 3 a.m., a drone trailing a banner that said hubris over Mr. Knight's patio. And in the fever dream version, the ligustrum would grow sentient, eventually rising to become a leafy magistrate presiding over a court of apartment injustices, banging a gavel made of pea gravel, sentencing intruders to community service sweeping breezeways. But the real end was better. Boring, lawful, neighborly, boring, which feels like a punchline and a gift. Months later, Regina left. Rumor said Regional shuffled her to a sister property off Highway 75. Rumor also said her cousin knew a guy at corporate, and it was all face-saving. Amanda installed a new manager named Carlos, who wore real work boots and had a laugh that made you think of cookouts and second chances. The garage list went public. A real Google sheet on the bulletin board with dates and initials. The Tahoe still visited sometimes, now parked where guests park. When it idled past 10 p.m., someone would text the group chat a single emoji, the little car, and someone else would respond with the parking ticket hubris meme, and the thread would light up with ha 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 like we were a sitcom. We'd all decided to watch for once. Occasionally, a new resident would leave their trash in the breezeway. It would take one note, polite, with a tiny binder clip attached like a joke, and the trash would vanish. We're adults, the note would say. We live here together. The phrase felt silly and sturdy at once, like a lawn chair that folds but holds. Sometimes I think about the version of me that wanted fire. He still lives inside. He still clicks on neighbor revenge clips that crack millions of views, the thumbnails all caps. He stole my spot, my epic payback. But now, when that algorithm tries to teach me, I close the app and take a walk around the complex at the magic hour, when the brick turns warm, and the kids ride scooters in circles, and someone down in Building A grills something that makes the whole place smell like luck. I stop by 27B on my way in. I look at the number on the asphalt and the space around it and the way it just is, and I feel gratitude in a place I didn't know had room for it. You don't always get justice that looks like a tow truck and a cheer. Sometimes it looks like a quiet night, a clean mat, and a single parking spot waiting for you when you finally come home. Sometimes neighbor revenge is the boring miracle of good rules, enforced evenly, like rain on a hot Texas afternoon that leaves the asphalt steaming and the city smelling new. And that, more than any gotcha, was the ending worth keeping.